We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast's discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit a million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
A very special episode of Archaeoanimals. Take it away, Alex. Or should I say, Jedi Master Alex.
Well, hello there. We're going to have to turn this off and start the whole podcast over again.
No, that was perfect. Come on, that was really good.
No, it was good. Right. Anyway, this is a very special episode of Archaeoanimals. As always, I'm your host, Alex Fitzpatrick. Unfortunately, my co-host, Simona is not here with us for this episode, which means I get full control of it. And of course, I've decided that is now a Star Wars podcast, and there's nothing Simona could do about it.
A surprise, but a welcome one.
Oh my god.
This is literally going to be unfortunately, if you don't like the prequels or like the main ones, and I know all the quotes, it's just going to be.
Yeah. If you don't like Star Wars, just turn it off. Like, I'm okay with it. Like, Simona also isn't really, like, not to put her on blast, but she is not like the biggest Star Wars fan, which is why I got her blessing to do this episode while she's not here.
Maybe we should also just introduce me, because I'll be actually talking for a lot in this episode. I'm not in the background as much.
Yeah, straight from the underwater city of the Gungans in Naboo.
What are you thinking?
Ooh,
no, I'm not going to do that.
That's problematic.
Yeah, I know. That's really, it's so problematic. It'd be great to touch on maybe later at the end of the episode. Yeah, I'm not. It's like, I'm not doing Gungan appropriation. Yeah. But yeah, so you're going to actually hear me for the most of this episode. So strap yourselves in.
Yeah, I mean, it'll still be about archaeology and zooarchaeology, I promise. Like maybe like 10%, like a solid 10, maybe 5. I'm not sure. Okay. So I don't think we even touched upon my Star Wars love in this podcast, which is wild because it's probably like 90% of my personality, which I guess isn't a good thing these days.
I mean, depends on what, in what way you express yourself. I mean, I was thoroughly impressed by the show notes for this episode. I was like, wow, I'm going to have to start looking stuff up. Because I'm a kind of I'm an adjacent Star Wars fan. Like, I know, like, I've played the games, I've watched the films. Like, one of my favorite games has always been Rogue Squadron for the GameCube, which is really obscure. I love that.
I had that game. Yeah.
Battlefront 2, the original Battlefront 2 in 2005 version, please.
Well, I mean, I will say also, my partner bought Battlefront 2, the newer one, because it was on sale for like, 12 quid or something. And it's actually kind of fun. The single player is actually really good. I really enjoyed it. Battlefront 2005 still the best one, but just saying, just putting that apologetics out there. This is the kind of show everyone's going to be getting. So turn it off if you can't handle it. If you can't handle these truths that I'm speaking.
I must say, what I do not know a lot about is the extended universe and the kind of stuff expanded universe. And that's the stuff that Disney kind of said, we're going to throw that all away. Is that correct? Is that the stuff that Disney
here's the thing. Here's the thing. So, okay, when I was a kid, I was raised in a very Star Wars family. I mean, when they re-released the films in the late 90s, the special edition versions into theaters, my dad took me when I was like a kid. So, very big Star Wars fan. Between the original Star Wars and the prequels, there was a lot of expanded universe stuff happening, books, stuff like that. There's some really famous ones like the Thrawn trilogy that are out there. As a kid, I was really into the Jedi Knight series, which was about Han Solo's kids becoming Jedi. And I mean, they were written for kids, so like I was really into it. So when they said that all this stuff wasn't canon anymore, I was gutted. It was a true betrayal. I'm still not over it, even though I just recently went to the Disneyland Star Wars thing like last month. But still, not over it. You know, it's fine. But yeah, so the weird thing about the Star Wars expanded universe is that Disney's kind of been picking from it. So like, for the most part, it's not canon, but every so often they'll add stuff to the canon. There's a TV show called Rebels, which is really good, even though it's a cartoon. And they took Thrawn, who was this really amazing villain from the expanding universe, and made him a villain for like the last 2 seasons. So I do like that they are kind of cherry picking the best, because I'll be honest, there is also a lot of garbage in the expanding universe. My favorite being a character named Hohas Ekwish, who is a literal horse. Like, he's just like, it's a horse head, and that's an alien. Like, it's just a horse, and he's like a rebel pilot.
Amazing. Anything is possible in Star Wars. And yet we're going back to horses, which was one of the previous episodes. I wonder how many previous episodes we might touch on this one. So yeah, I think we should definitely start somewhere. But I want to say the phrase. Are you ready for this one?
Okay.
Now this is podcasting. Get it? It's like pod racing.
I've got my phone out, and I'm calling 999, and I'm calling the cops now, correct. And I'm telling them.
Oh, right.
And I'm telling them they're passing me to the podcasting cops, and they are coming to arrest you.
You cannot get the podcasting cops. Cannot touch me.
Why are you the Senate?
I am the Senate. That came out a lot more.
I knew you were
like...
going to say that, and yet I almost spit my water out.
Like, I didn't mean it for it to come out like that. I felt possessed. Right.
This podcast is going to be unlistenable because it's just going to be me giggling for like an hour. So
uncivilized. Right. And love this. Right. Why don't you start us off with why is Zooarchaeology and like Star Wars? What's the connection there?
Okay, this is my thesis statement. I've like wanted to write like a book about this. Star Wars as a concept is all about archaeology. That is my thesis statement. I 100% believe this. If you look at all the stories, the films, the TV shows, the novels, the books, or whatever, everything. It's all about this concept of material heritage and why it's so important. It's so good. The Jedi are all about this kind of material heritage. They canonically have historians and archaeologists who work for them. They're constantly looking for, because, you know, the Jedi have spanned thousands and thousands of years in this universe, constantly looking for artifacts that relate to the Jedi and new sites, like holy sites, basically, to channel the Force. The Sith do the same thing, but they do it for propaganda purposes. They have these huge tombs. They use it to hoard all their power even after death. Everything is about archaeology. It's about passing things through lineages. It's all about that kind of stuff. And that means, by default, Star Wars must also be about zooarchaeology, because you cannot have archaeology without zooarchaeology. Done. Turn this podcast off, because I'm done.
That's beautiful. That is definitely a mission statement. Yeah. I love it. I mean, I can kind of understand where you're coming from with that, especially, I guess, because obviously it's the whole thing about, like, what's Obi-Wan say? It was removed from the holocron, or what was the thing when he finds out that, like,
if we can't find it, it doesn't exist. Basically, that I forgot her name. She's a Jedi librarian who apparently in the comics has this amazing arc where she like goes nuts after the fall of Jedi and like just goes ham on the Empire. It rules, and then she dies.
So if we're looking at Star Wars from a kind of an archaeological perspective, and we're talking about thousands and thousands of years of like, you know, groups that have existed for thousands of years, are you kind of suggesting that maybe there were like, I don't know, Jedis who specifically were like archaeologists?
So in the actual canon, there are according to the Jedi Path, a manual for students of the Force, a book that I've owned for years now. What I think is,
of course,
technically, I think is only semi-canon because it references things that happen in the expanded universe. But I believe the core text itself is canon. So the Jedi actually have multiple like sections. You have the people that we normally consider Jedi, like the Jedi Knights, stuff like that. They're like, you know, the foot soldiers. And then you actually have certain sections of people who don't necessarily, it's people who don't pass their Jedi Knight trials, or people who voluntarily are like, I actually don't want to do cop stuff. I'm going to go be like a scholar. So there's like different sections. There's like an agricultural like section that specifically uses the Force to like help with, you know, planets that are dealing with famine and like growing and learning new techniques and stuff like that. You got like an exploratory one that and that one involves archaeologists and like zoologists and stuff like that. So technically, I guess they would have to meet in the middle and have zooarchaeologists as well, because they're going to like the outer rim where like not many people have gone, and looking at, you know, looking at different species, past species, things like that. I cannot believe that this is stuff I'm saying off the top of my head.
And I think, you know, like, obviously it sounds like we're trying to do a wee bit of a shoe-in, and I think there's a bit of shoeing done there. But actually, when you think of the Star Wars, even just the Star Wars films, there are so many alien creatures in all the films. I mean, cast your minds back to A New Hope, where in the Star Wars cantina, there was like aliens of all different kind of like backgrounds. There was obviously all the creatures that you could see around the hive of scum and villainy. Sorry, I love that voice. That Obi-Wan, like old Obi-Wan, is so good. It is
very good, yeah.
That's so good. But there has always been a remarkable amount of like alien creatures alongside, you know, humanoid aliens in the Star Wars universe. It's always been packaged and parcel of all of that. So I can definitely see the comparison. But the next step is like, how does that, how would you even go about figuring out what the zooarchaeology of that could be?
Oh, don't worry. I don't know if you looked at the notes of the show. I have a whole thing about the problematic aspect of zooarchaeology, and not only the problematic aspect of zooarchaeology, but the entire concept of a zoology or even a bestiary in the Star Wars universe, because there's these different levels of quote unquote sentience, but then you also have force sensitivity, that all these different aliens can be sensitive to the force in different ways, which again goes back to sentience, and like, does that imply a higher level of sentience? It's a whole thing. And obviously, like, the real answer to this is that it's a sci-fi fantasy for kids. So
but Alex, what about midichlorians?
That's true. Do you think that there would be a way for Jedi archaeologists to look at the bones of someone and figure out their midichlorian count?
I don't, because I thought the midichlorians are they're living part of the Force.
But
like
the Force doesn't technically die, as we know. So,
no, it's the conservation of force. It just transforms from one type into another. Conservation of mass, Alex. Duh.
See, the problem with this episode is going to alienate all our listeners and also get a bunch of nerds mad at me. This is like a lose-lose situation.
Mad at you. I am opening myself up for a lot of pain here.
I mean, you deserve it. This is your reckoning.
Of course. Oh, this is, I'm getting my just desserts. I was just thinking, like, obviously you were talking about almost like you were saying the Jedi obviously want to understand history and find powerful Jedi artifacts, and the Sith were just using history for propaganda. But I think there's a bit more at stake there, isn't there? Because one could see from a certain perspective that, are the Jedi not just trying to acquire objects of power? I mean, and who's to say that the Jedi are going to use them in the right way? I mean, I'm sorry, but the Jedi have never sat well with me. You know,
don't worry. I'm not a Jedi apologist. Okay, so for many people who have listened, maybe have played, there's a game called Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords, which is by far the greatest Star Wars game ever made, and probably the best Star Wars story ever written. It's extremely good. I would suggest you play it if you haven't. But there's a character named Kreia who's the joke is that she's like a very you can't please her, whatever. But she's very anti-Jedi. And I've loved that concept ever since I played that as like a 12-year-old or whatever. And I wanted to go to the Last Jedi premiere with a shirt that said Kreia was right. Forgot to make that, but basically Kreia was right. Jedi should die. Just saying. Hot take.
Very, very hot take, especially because I feel like there's been a lot of kind of especially with obviously the more recent films with The Last Jedi, there has been a lot of exploration of what it does mean to be a Jedi and what the purpose of being, tied to that order is. But maybe we should explore that a little bit later in the show and bring it more to what you were saying earlier about the use of history. So how do we know that history and heritage how is it used by both the Jedi and the Sith?
I mean, it's hard to center this just on the films because they're very, oddly enough, they are very contained stories, even though they have very, high stakes for the universe or whatever. Even if you look at the entirety of the Skywalker, they call it the Skywalker saga now, and that's all about lineage and, Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber being something that's literally handed down from generation to generation. And that's such a core concept that has a lot of archaeological, vibes, archaeological vibes with it. Mm-hmm. But even there, one of the things I always think about when I think about archaeology and Star Wars is the holocrons, which are, for those who don't know, are nerds. The holocrons are basically these artifacts that Jedi and Sith can record their teachings, basically almost their essence in them for later Jedi and Sith to find, and they can pass their teachings on to that. And obviously there's a big, thing of if you're a Jedi student who finds a Sith holocron, that's not the best thing ever and stuff like that. But that's such an interesting concept when you think about it archaeologically. It's literally the past talking to you. Mm-hmm. And it always makes me think about future archaeologists and finding random videos and stuff of people from the past. Except holocrons can be weird because I believe that they do contain the essence of the person, so it has a little bit of a mind of its own.
There's definitely a selection of YouTube videos that I never ever want a future archaeologist to come across. I mean, there's so many of them that I don't know how to explain. You know what I mean? There's a couple of vines I never really want to explain, but they're just funny, I'm trying to think of that. Yeah. And memes will be very difficult to explain. But you know what I mean? That's the kind of thought that you had there was, I can see how, certain content could probably, in the wrong hands in the future, give a wrong... if these holocrons only hold what people put into them, it means that there's a lot of history and a lot of information that gets lost. And it's almost because you have those kind of holocrons that have this bit of information, you're almost not looking for other information because, hey, you've got all the information in this one little neat package. So I'd be wondering how that kind of affects how people in the Star Wars universe kind of take on that knowledge and that thing without it being too kind of prescriptive, without it being kind of just almost well, if you don't have it on holocron, did it ever happen? That
I mean, Yeah, that's something that actually there's something I really like about that because the problems, not the problems, but something I see because of the films is that there's this very big like it's always the Jedi versus the Sith. It's the main conflict in all these things. And one thing that Knights of the Old Republic 2 does really well is there's a bit where you can talk to one of the characters who's not a Jedi or a Sith, and he's just like, from the perspective of a regular person, Jedi Sith, you're both the same. You're both two people with an enormous amount of power, and we're all normal people who are just like terrified of you. And I always wish that that was a concept that they brought more into the films, because I find them really interesting and totally accurate. You know, these people have so much power, political power especially, and clearly they're able to leave these holocrons that can rewrite history for people in the future, you know what I mean? And it's like really interesting to be like, what about the regular person who's like, actually, I don't like either of those people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing, is that because of the centering of that, it's these two sides of, but I don't sometimes even know what the Jedi stand for, because in the prequels, it's pretty obvious the Jedi are basically just like, they just look after the politicians. You know what I mean? Like they ensure, I love democracy. You know, they ensure democracy, but like, to what standard is that democracy if it can just like, be overturned with thunderous applause? You know, like I'm really trying here so hard.
Do you just have this? Do you have the prequel scripts out in front of you?
No, I just know these key moments. They're so quotable. It's so good. But like, I find it funny that like I don't actually know, apart from this kind of context that you're given, that like on, oh god, the name of the planet escapes me, where the Senate is, it's Coruscant. Yes. Oh, I don't actually know what they do apart from that. Is there any kind of indication of what they're doing in the rest of the universe or rest of the planets?
Yeah, no, I mean, they're basically kind of just like your general kind of, or like, they're not really well planned, because I like think about who actually wrote the idea of the Senate, but they're kind of just like a UN basically of like all these different planets, like representatives and stuff like that. They're never really completely fleshed out. In like stuff about the Old Republic, they're basically more of like, again, just like a big government body that's like fighting off people from the Outer Rim. So that's either the Sith or the Mandalorians, stuff like that. It's just a bunch of bureaucrats, really. So like, it's a shame that I like to believe that at some point in the Star Wars history that the Jedi kind of just get subsumed into being like cops for the government.
Yeah, I think that's pretty evident in the prequels that that's what they are. Oh dear. Right. I think that's a good point to take a break, and we'll be back right after this.
Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high-quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high-quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on, and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code ANIMALS.
America. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. By honoring your sacred vocation of nursing, you impact your family, your friends, and your community. At Grand Canyon University, our online RN to BSN, MSN, or DNP degree programs allow you to balance online coursework with local in-person clinical, practicum, or immersion hours. Find your purpose at GCU. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit a million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
And we're back talking about archaeology and zooarchaeology in the Star Wars kind of universe. Alex is kind of like, she's very, very happy to be talking about this.
I was so happy. First of all, I did actually eat dinner before we recorded. Secondly, I was so hyped to record. I was like, I have to go. I need to talk about Star Wars for an hour. It's the best day of my life. I miss you, Simona. I miss you so much, by the way. I don't want it to seem like, I miss you and I wish you liked Star Wars more.
One of the great things about the Star Wars universe especially is the variety of different environments that our heroes travel to.
You mean wet planet, and you mean sand planet, and then you mean city planet, and ice planet?
Okay, I mean, yeah, maybe they're a bit mono environmental, but do you have any favorite kind of planets out of the Star Wars universe?
I always liked, this is going to be me pulling out Expanded Universe stuff.
Is it unpronounceable by any chance?
No, I always liked Corbin. Corbin is the quote unquote Sith planet, basically.
Are you sure it's not the leader of the Labour Party in the UK? Sorry, Corvin, right? Corbin,
Korriban, or maybe it's one R and two B's, whatever. It's a Star Wars. It's a Star Wars word. You just kind of hit the text, and that's a Star Wars word. But yeah, it's I always liked it because it was literally just like an archaeology planet, because it was basically ruled by Sith Lords for thousands of years. So when the Old Republic stuff takes place, there's now a Sith Academy there, because there's this weird thing where the Sith go from, obviously first they were an actual race of aliens, like an ancient race, and then it becomes a philosophy that uses the Force. And then it becomes like a counter. It's kind of like what the Empire ends up being. Like, it kind of becomes like its own organized political force. It's very strange. But so there's a Sith Academy on Corbin, and like 90% of the students end up doing archaeological digs, which tend to be extremely dangerous because they're all Sith Lord temples, which means that they're all imbued with the dark side. So like you can't go into a temple without getting attacked by like ancient droids and Force ghosts and like a Rancor or whatever. Stuff like that. It's fun.
No, it's pretty cool. And you've name dropped like some of the like main creatures that people do know, like the Rancor.
I do love Rancor.
Oh, that's which film is that one in?
That is in Return of the Jedi, which is hot take. Return of the Jedi is my favorite Star Wars film.
Really? Yeah. Okay, right. Maybe this is the point where we should actually ask you what order.
Oh gosh, don't do this to me.
Come on, okay, right. Go on.
It's probably Return of the Jedi. Are we doing this like all of them in totality, or just the original trilogy?
No, give him a totality. It's only 9 films. Like, come on, Alex.
Well, not 9 films. There's more if you count spin-offs.
What's? No, I'm not counting spin-offs.
To be fair, I actually really also like Rogue One, and I would have put it up there.
Rogue One is really good, actually.
Movie, and I will stand my ground on that.
Yeah, no, it's really good. It's excellent.
But it would probably actually be like Return of the Jedi, Empire Strikes Back, A New Hope. I would probably put those 3 first, and then like Rogue One, Force Awakens, and then everything else kind of goes to the side because I was like, meh. The Last Jedi.
Wait, you're saying Attack of the Clones is not
Actually,
a good film?
you know what? On sheer level of doofy stuff, I would probably put Attack of the Clones as like kind of higher up because it's just fun. It is. I will say that it's very fun.
No, it definitely is. One of my favorite planets is Kashyyyk.
I do love Kashyyyk.
If you're familiar with Kashyyyk,
excuse me.
it's actually one.
Excuse me.
It's one of my favorite planets to play in the Star Wars Battlefront game. And so, Alex, why is Kashyyyk important? What's important about Kashyyyk?
Because they've got our Wookiee friends that we all love.
We do love the Wookiees.
We do love the Wookiees. I actually don't know what you were trying to get at.
No, like I'm asking you about Kashyyyk. It's like literally my favorite planet.
Oh, okay.
Like I'm being serious here.
Oh my God. I can't tell when we're joking on this podcast. Especially when it's just me and you who basically kind of just antagonize each other and Simona's not here to keep the peace and order.
That's my secret. I'm always joking.
That's the wrong franchise.
That's the wrong film. Yeah, I know, but you still understood.
Yeah, I know. I hate it. I hate it so much. What a sickness, truly.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Kashyyyk is interesting. And actually it kind of gets at this like weird thing of like, where does zooarchaeology or even zoology fit into the Star Wars universe? Because, you know, the Wookiees are not, they're non-humanoid. And that's actually kind of funny that even in the in-universe like language, they differentiate between humanoid and non-humanoid species. And I guess that's also because there are plenty of humanoid species, like the Chiss, who are basically people like humans who are painted blue. But yeah, so yeah, okay. But like the Wookiees are clearly, you know, they're their own species, but they have, you know, they are, you would clearly say they're sentient. They have their own language. They have their own culture.
And they celebrate Life Day, you know,
Day,
all
Lumpy's
the things.
There. I mean, what more can you ask for? I love Lumpy.
Oh, there's some really weird stuff in the Star Wars universe, isn't there?
And like, I wouldn't have it any other way. When I was a kid, I loved that cartoon droids and Ewok thing that we had on VHS.
Droids and Ewok thing? What was that about?
Yeah, it was like, I think it was from the holiday special. There was like a little, like really poorly done cartoon of like C-3PO and R2-D2 on an adventure, and then like Wicket and like the Ewoks. I am a very big Ewok apologist. I love the Ewoks. They're so cute.
Could you imagine? I just would love to know if like the Ewoks have like cultural heritage. Like there's like, is there like a little tiny like...
But they do, because they clearly have like, there's like clearly a hierarchy in Return of the Jedi. There's a main, like a chieftain, basically. And, you know, the fact that they looked at C-3PO and assumed he was a god means that they have some kind of cosmological belief system that specifically has those kind of concepts embedded in them.
What I'd really like to see is like a paper on Ewok hunting strategies and like the preparation of like food for Ewok consumption. So like, do they have kill sites and then butchering sites, or do they like, how do they get the stuff up the trees? What kind of mixture?
I mean, they clearly use rock technology, which means they're clearly using they do flint napping and stuff like that. Actually, they clearly do, because they have spears and stuff like that. So yeah, no, they would have a rich archaeological, although, you know, actually would be interesting is having to plan out the kind of like, because when their stuff decays, it would fall from the trees. So that would have a really interesting kind of, archaeology in Star Wars is awesome. Please let me do my postdoc in this, because I can't think of anything else to do.
It is fantastic. And actually, when you're talking about sentience, one of the really interesting things about Star Wars is that like there's a lot of sentience about. Like I what about droids? Are droids sentient in the Star Wars universe?
Okay, so I finally watched Solo, which is not a great film. The only good thing about that film is that Donald Glover is a fantastic Lando, but it's not a great film. It has this weird Did you see Solo?
No, I've not seen Solo. I don't care about spoiling it.
Yeah, well, it's not really a spoiler. It's like there's this weird subplot where there's one of the characters is a droid, and she's very like pro droid rights, and it's like this weird subplot that never really goes anywhere, and which kind of annoys me because that's actually like a really interesting thing that I would love to see Star Wars tackle, because there's this kind of recurring joke throughout all of like Star Wars media of like people who hate droids, you know, who don't trust droids, who don't want to talk to droids, stuff like that. You know, they're always that character, that like Han Solo type character who's like, oh, you can understand him, or like get this like trash can out of my way type character. And I would love to know why there's that antagonism. Is it like a weird, like, are droids immediately a subclass because they're created to serve other people? There clearly are some kind of sentience about it. I mean, you know, other than like programming issues, you have that thing of like, you know, droids can be as willful as anyone else. You know, R2-D2 makes sarcastic jokes and stuff like that. Like, they clearly can choose whether or not to do stuff. You have droids also who like, you know, there are droids who are also like villains and stuff like that, and they have that kind of thing in it. It is interesting. And also, if you know anything about the content from Knights of the Republic 2, they were supposed to have a droid planet called M478. So that kind of throws another wrench in the works. No pun intended.
What's a droid planet? What do we know of the droid planet?
Well, the fun thing is actually someone created a mod that restores all this content, because actually the content was in the files or something like that. Knights of the Republic 2 is a really interesting case of not being finished. It's done by Obsidian, which is a studio I love. But basically, there was a game that got rushed, but all the content was there. So there's so many mods that are restoring all this content, so you can like play it as it kind of was meant to be, and that's why it's such a great game. But yeah, so it was literally a planet run by droids. Like, it was run by droids. Only droids really lived there. If the level was actually implemented into the game, like, you had to like do all these quests for other droids, and like, it was interesting to see also that some droids had different jobs that made it. I guess I don't want to say sentience, because I am very pro droid rights, but yeah, there's like, you know, the droid that picks up the garbage is different from the droid who's a protocol droid and can like have full conversations with you, you know, and can speak so many different languages. It's really interesting. So yeah, would they be considered, like, if you found if you were looking at the archaeology of a droid settlement, let's say, would that be considered? Would you say that they're material finds, or would you say that they're not necessarily organic remains, but would you treat them as like they're organic remains? I have a lot of questions.
I mean, this feels very much like the work that like Andrew Reinhardt has done on No Man's Sky, you know, with this kind of procedurally generated planet. You know, like, yes, the algorithm is made by humans, but like, because it's the procedural generation, is there maybe some sort of like weird pseudo like computer creation of this? And like, is the cultural kind of like patterns that appear out of that procedural generation really tied to the algorithm writer directly, or is there a way to kind of so randomly generated or procedurally generated that is almost in its own right creating that new thing? And this is the thing about droids, or I mean, this is the thing about artificial intelligence, isn't it? It's this idea that like, if we build smart enough artificial intelligence, one day it will create something that we could never create as human beings. And it's a really, really big question. And it just feels a bit small compared to, well, like some big compared to Star Wars, you know. And so the Star Wars universe, how would that work? I'm like, we're talking about AI here.
Yeah, ignoring like the Force itself as a concept and an actual tangible thing.
we actually haven't even touched on this Force that much. Do you want to kind of like, I know everybody kind of knows what the Force is. I think even people who haven't watched Star Wars know what the Force is. But like, if I dive into your expanded universe, your EU knowledge, what do we learn about the Force that's maybe not so well known from the films and stuff?
So one thing I think that becomes a common misconception, and I think some of this is also just me kind of like redirecting Star Wars into something that's a bit more academic, I guess. But the way I've always understood it is that the Force is actually in everyone. The way that the Jedi say is the Force connects all of us, all living beings. And so it does actually exist in everyone. The Force just manifests in different ways. So you have people who are Force sensitive, which means that they have a higher level of midichlorians, or they're just a little bit more sensitive to the Force, and that's how they can manipulate things and use Force powers and stuff like that. And then you have people where the Force kind of manifests in smaller ways. So take someone like Han Solo, who just has like, good luck. He has good shots and stuff like that. I mean, he doesn't always have good luck, but like that's kind of the manifestation of the Force through him. So gunslingers who are really good shots, pilots who are just really good pilots, they may not be Jedi or Sith, but they still are manifesting the Force through these ways, and that's how they kind of do it. So yeah, like the Force is everywhere. And it's also, one thing I think of archaeologically that's interesting is the Force exists kind of after death as well. So we know that Jedi, when they die, they can totally integrate themselves into the Force. And in the films, they show this by having the person disappear, which will always be goofy to me, and I love it. Like Yoda is just like, I'm out, and then disappears. So like, how would that actually affect the archaeological record? We're missing all these bodies. So do we have to have this assumption that maybe they just kind of were consumed back into the Force?
But then the other side of it is they come back as a Force ghost, so we could just ask them. Like it almost defeats the purpose of archaeology if you can just actually just talk to the person. Oh, sorry, hi. Could you explain why that's here and that's here? Oh, we just that was just us, like that. We were just doing this and this and this. Okay, just sorry. Can I write that down again, please? Like that.
And that's the thing too, that actually I've been meaning to write a blog post about this, but like interactivity with the past is so prevalent in Star Wars, like Force ghosts, holocrons to an extent. I mean, literally. You can run into Force spirits and channel them in certain temples and stuff. So it's kind of just like, what is the past in a world where you can directly speak to someone who lived at that point, It's weird.
Now we're going to head for a break. What? Now there are two of them. Anyway, enjoy this and we'll be back soon.
They fly now?
You may have heard my pitch for membership. It's a great idea and really helps out. However, you can also support us by picking up a fun t-shirt, sticker, or something from a large selection of items from our TeePublic store. Head over to arcpodnet.com/shop for a link. That's arcpodnet.com/shop to pick up some fun swag and support the show.
And we're back after the breaks talking Star Wars archaeology, and more specifically Star Wars Zooarchaeology, although we haven't talked too much about this.
We haven't talked any of it.
So I think we're definitely going to have to dedicate this segment definitely to more of the Zooarchaeology of it. Because I think this show is meant to be called Archaeoanimals, so I think we should really stick to that. So
I guess
in Archaeoanimals style, we always have the case studies at the end. So let's see. Alex, do you want to take this away? What do you want to talk about more than anything else?
We need to talk about Baby Yoda.
Right, okay, can you explain the whole Baby Yoda phenomenon? I don't have access to the Mandalorian, so can you help me out here?
Baby Yoda is real and strong and is my friend, and I don't know what else you want me to say about it.
Have you been watching The Mandalorian?
I have. It's a great show. It's everything I wanted in a Star Wars live action show, but that's neither here nor there. We're here about Baby Yoda, the cutest thing in the world. Love it. And here we go. It's time for me to, can you see what I'm doing? I'm pulling out the tinfoil hat. I'm putting it on my head. time for me to talk about the Yoda species conspiracy theory.
Okay, right. I'm ready. I've got the popcorn out.
Here we go.
What is the Yoda species conspiracy theory?
I've literally never seen anyone else talk about this. This is only something that I've yelled about before. So the reason why we refer to this baby, although I guess baby is not the right word, because the way that the species seems to age means, I don't know. I guess infant is the right word. It's in the story, they say that the baby is 50 years old, but Yoda lives to be 900, so it's clearly like a huge age range. Anyway, so the reason why we refer to it as Baby Yoda isn't just because, the only other, there's two Yodas that we've seen. We have obviously Yoda, and then we have Yaddle from Phantom Menace, and only in Phantom Menace, by the way, female species of Yoda.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's not a lot of Yodas.
So, yeah.
Like, I don't know. I know obviously Yoda is his name,
which
right?
is messed up. We should call them Yaddles.
Are they called I don't know. Are they actually called, what species is Yoda?
See, that's the thing I'm talking about. The other reason why we refer to it as Baby Yoda is because that species has never in any of the expanded universe had a name before.
Right. Okay. So it's, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So what's the
here's my theory. When The Mandalorian takes place, this isn't really spoilers. When The Mandalorian takes place, it is after the original trilogy. So in that context, Yoda has already died. So the whole kind of main plot of the series in general is that there's a bounty out on Baby Yoda's life. And why is that? Here's my theory. Yoda is still alive, and he wants to be the only Yoda in the universe. So he put a bounty out on this baby. And he also killed Yaddle from Phantom Menace, because here's the thing. Yaddle, if you watch Phantom Menace, Yaddle is never mentioned by name, but you can see her in the council scenes. So she's part of the Jedi Council. She wasn't part of the Jedi Council because apparently Yoda did not want her to be on the council, which is wild because she was imprisoned for like a century and only had to survive on the Force. And that's how she became a Jedi Master, because she came back and they're like, oh my gosh, you clearly have a huge connection to the Force. Yoda was the only one who was like, I don't really care for this. Why? Because Yoda did not like someone else from his species showing up. So he clearly killed her. And that's my conspiracy theory.
Right. Okay. Well, as with every good conspiracy theory, I have a few questions. So why would Yoda... I don't understand the only being the only one of his species left. I mean, why would you... That's almost like self-destructive. It's ridiculous. But when does Yaddle die? Like...
Yaddle isn't seen in any of the other movies, and I don't think Yaddle actually has like a canon, quote unquote canon, like death. I think it's just assumed she dies during Order 66. This is just like a fun theory that I like to throw out because I like to like dunk on Yoda occasionally because I think Yoda's funny, but
Right. No worries.
Watch it be real, folks. Mandalorian season 2. Joke's on you, I'm now head writer.
Oh God, I wouldn't want to. I perish the thought. So I think we should possibly talk about a less sentient, more sentient. I don't know. This is kind of a weird kind of thing because I feel like because Yoda's species can kind of use the Force, can converse and talk, it's a kind of a separation between that and some of the other animals in the Star Wars universe. What else? What's your next case study then?
I love porgs. Porgs are my favorite. Porgs are hilarious because they're so cute. I have so many porg themed things in my house right now. I'm staring at a stuffed porg, not a real stuffed porg, obviously, not taxidermy, but like a plushie of a porg right now in my office while we record this. Porgs are the best. What was I going with this? Oh, so porgs are just funny to me because the reason they exist is because when they were filming in Ireland, there was just so many puffins that they had to just CGI little porgs over them, which is hilarious. I love it.
That's so good. I mean, that is... Yeah. So, you know, where I grew up, there's an island off the coast called Rathlin Island, and it's full of puffins. Like anytime I've been to Rathlin Island, there's been lots and lots of puffins, and I mean, they're like cute. Puffins are great, but and actually puffins have been known to actually use tools as well. To I remember there was a story about puffins like using a stick to scratch themselves and stuff. Like puffins are smart, so yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah, puffins. Porgs make really funny faces in Star Wars, and that's why I love them. But one thing I always find really what I thought interesting, especially watching The Last Jedi and knowing the real life place that they were filming at, which is like, you know, an actual like archaeological place. I was just thinking like, oh man, it must be so annoying to excavate around puffins. And then I just realized, oh my gosh, it must be so annoying to be an Ahto, I believe that's how you pronounce it, or at least that's how I'm going to pronounce it, the planet that the porgs are from. Imagine being an archaeologist there and having to deal with porgs all the time.
Could you not just get a Wookiee to scare them off?
You could, but like, I mean, especially speaking of if the direct correlation, real life correlation from porgs is puffins, as someone who's working on a site from the coast of Scotland where puffins exist, and my bird samples are just like 10% puffin and then like 80% seagull, like. It's just, I feel so bad for the Jedi archaeologists who are working on that planet. It must be a nightmare.
And actually, what was happening when you were, because you have excavated up in Scotland. What have you had to do to get rid of puffins off site, or how have they impeded your work when you've been up there?
Well, the lucky thing is the last time I excavated, we were in a cave, so there was less. If anything, I ran more into like bird nests, and I felt so bad for like tripping into bird nests that were on the seashore. I do remember though, when I was digging in Orkney, we were told of this bird that if you were at a certain height, it would like dive and could possibly like dive into your skull and kill you. I just remember being warned about that. So birds are truly the enemies of all archaeologists. Truly.
And I mean, obviously the way a porg is kind of like built, it's quite egg-shaped. So skeletally, how would a porg skeleton look? Is there any option?
I've seen people try to draw porg skeletons, and it runs into that issue of like when people like draw, you know, like SpongeBob as a skeleton or like Mickey Mouse as a skeleton, where it's like obviously they're a little bit exaggerated. But I always assume that, of course, because porgs are associated with puffins, but I don't think skeletally they would be puffins. I think they would be more like penguins. Mm-hmm. You know, where what looks like is like a big oval head is really like a small cranium, and then a lot of feathers and fat surrounding a neck. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I can see that. I'd be actually, you know, coming back to Kashyyyk, because like my favorite planet, I'd be really interested to see what like Wookiee remains were like, because I don't know if we have any indication of whether do Wookiees like cremate the dead, do they bury the dead, do we know anything about that?
I'm trying to remember. See, I do know that there's a Shadowland that the Wookiees have. So as you know from like the prequels and stuff, Kashyyyk, they're kind of like the Ewoks where they build high up in the trees. And then there's a bottom portion where like the apex predators live that you see in like video games occasionally. And it's always of like, they always like put it as like, oh, that's the Shadowlands. You don't go in the Shadowlands unless, you know, you're trying to prove your mettle or something like that. So I've always kind of assumed that maybe that might be used in funerary rites of the Wookiees. I mean, the fact that they refer to it as like the Shadowlands really invokes a kind of like underworld type thing. So like the idea of them either, you know, like depositing them down there to have the apex predators, you know, eat and disarticulate, being a ritual or something like that. Like, you know, hire me to write your Star Wars stuff.
Oh, the call has been put out. The call has been put out.
Yeah.
Is there any? Okay, so I think we should. We're getting towards the end. Is there maybe another case study? I think we can squeeze another case study in, Alex. What do you got
this
for
one
us?
actually is will touch upon stuff that we haven't really talked about per se. We kind of mentioned it. So one of my favorite animals in Star Wars is the Hiss, which is an expanded universe creature that exists on Korriban. And they're these like dragon-like creatures that can turn invisible and have also been noted to use to affect the minds of people using basically Jedi mind tricks. And that's the kind of creature I put towards you when I say, how would this be considered part of a Star Wars Zooarchaeology?
Yeah, I see it. I see it. You don't want to dig there. You want to give me your lunch. I know. I'm trying to think of what these creatures would actually be wanting to do with their Jedi mind tricks. You know, like,
yeah,
throw the ball. I'm just trying to think what are the creatures'
But yeah,
needs.
no, it's weird and like I don't know. I just like them. I always like their design. The way that they introduce them in the video game is like you're not supposed to touch any of the lootable stuff in the desert because if you do, one of them will show up. Right. So it's very much a whole like I want to get loot, but these things are actually kind of hard to kill. I just enjoy them because they're invisible dragons and.
So what do they look like?
They literally they're kind of like Komodo dragon-y type look. They are literally dragons, basically. To be honest, if you look at a lot of Star Wars creatures that don't show up in the films, a lot of them tend to be dragons. So
so where would we normally be finding these dragon creatures? These hisses? Hissi?
Yeah, HSISS. So I don't know. But yeah, they normally live in Korriban. Clearly they're very reptilian, which makes sense. They would be able to thrive in a complete desert planet because, you know, these planets can't have more than one environmental condition.
Of course.
Which is funny because also that must mean preservation is probably not bad in Korriban or like places like Hoth. But if you go to Manon, which is all water, forget it.
And I think that's one of the really interesting things that you can kind of start to consider is that these large environments would have very, very good preservation conditions. But of course, if, like you said, the Hiss show up if you start trying to excavate, that could probably be an issue.
Yeah, it's basically Star Wars archaeology is basically taking archaeology to its pop culture, apex. In that Star Wars makes archaeology a literal do or die adventure thing, and that makes sense. You look at the guy who created Star Wars, George Lucas, who's also one of the minds behind Indiana Jones. It's at the end of the day, if you're talking about archaeology in Star Wars, you're also talking about the very exceptionalized version of archaeology. You know.
I've got a question though. Is Grey literature written by Grey Jedi in the Star Wars universe? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It came to me and I had to.
Hi, operator. Can you pass me along to the police, please?
Can you imagine?
I have a complaint. Hello? I'm being subjected to bad jokes on a podcast. If you could come pick him up as soon as possible, that'd be great. He's committing a murder, actually. He's murdering my show.
Oh dear. Oh, I honestly I think too highly of myself here.
Yeah, you do.
Oh, I'm so ready. I'm so ready. Oh dear. So what would your closing thoughts be about the archaeology of Star Wars? Is there anything that we really need to go over?
I would say that one, Star Wars is all about archaeology, and I think more archaeologists, if they want to have fun for once, should kind of look into that. I think it's a very interesting kind of theoretical place to bounce off these kind of ideas about archaeology, and also, it's Star Wars as well. Two, zooarchaeology in space, not just in space, but in Star Wars, it would be incredibly fraught. It would be very problematic, I guess, because you would be coming from a human-centric perspective, and we still don't really understand whether or not humans are the most populous species in the Star Wars universe or not. I mean, whatever. And three, I love Baby Yoda, so I don't know what else you want me to say. Also, did you know that there are Star Wars archaeology toys? Please send me some because they look fun.
They're what? What are they? Do you know what they are?
Yeah, they're like those digging kits where you can find skulls, badly created skulls of Star Wars creatures, and it's great. I put a picture of it in the show notes. It sent me on an hour of going down a rabbit hole trying to figure out where I can order these. It's great.
I just want to take one more minute of your time, obviously, to talk about almost one step above it all, because I think this kind of almost like speculative archaeology is something that's really, really interesting. I think this is where archaeology has a chance to kind of broaden its appeal. I think a lot of the time people don't realize that archaeology isn't simply about uncovering a past that, well, we already know most of it and we're just finding out the finer details, or it's almost like specific to a certain part of the world. But you can actually take the same skills you have in archaeology and almost like apply it to a human created cultural world. I think that's something that's really interesting. What kind of things would you like to see people actually be producing, apart from obviously you're going to write the next show? Yes. I know that, but this kind of research is actually genuinely quite interesting. What do you think about it? I
just think it brings a lot of, because I mean, as I've finished my PhD, I'm actually really interested in this idea of using post-humanistic approaches to archaeology. I'm really interested in moving away from an anthropocentric zooarchaeology and things like that. And I think Star Wars is actually a really cool place to kind of work out some of those theoreticals, because it's a place where humans aren't the only, sentient, species. There's all these other alien races, and we still don't really have an idea of, who was the first race to make contact with all these other places and stuff like that. So it almost puts you on this kind of even ground of, okay, so we're all relatively equal, how do we approach looking at cultures this way, if that makes sense? Mm-hmm. It's really interesting. It's very separate from the human experience in this imaginary world, and I think that's a really cool place to do it. Anyway, I just want you to know that because I'm the person who gave you all this information, I have the high ground. So
no, you were the chosen one, Alex. You were my.
Don't try it.
Yeah, no, I love these. I must say, one of the things that will always remain with me is the cultural relevance of the prequels to modern kind of I'd say modern geekery. I don't know how to put that in a better term, but I just thought the culture of the prequels and the original trilogy as well. Really, I think it's definitely shaped a lot of people's lives. I think that's really something it's so connective, I think that's really good. Do you have anything to, do you have a favorite line from Star Wars? It doesn't have to be one of the bad ones.
I don't know. I just I like when Watto has that little beard in it's not a line, but I think about it a lot. When Watto has that little beard in Attack of the Clones, I honestly think about that every day of my life. It's horrible. He's got a little beard. Okay, he's got 3 little hairs. It's so awful. Why would you animate that?
there were a lot of choices that were made in the Star Wars films that I wonder why it was animated. It's really odd, some of it, but you know, we wouldn't have Star Wars if we didn't have those little quirks.
Yum. Don't we much music? I think that's an episode there.
Yeah. Remember, you can like and follow the show on Twitter. Are you only on Facebook? I can't remember. Can you?
We are on Facebook as well at Archaeoanimals. Like literally, just write at Archaeoanimals. You'll find our page, and yeah. That's basically, we're also obviously on the Archaeology Podcast Network website and basically wherever you get podcasts. And to all my Jawa listeners out there, Utini.
Beautiful.
Thank you for listening to Archaeoanimals. Please subscribe and rate the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. You can find us on Twitter at Archaeoanimals. Also, the views expressed on the podcast are those of ourselves, the hosts and guests, and do not necessarily represent those of our institution, employers, and the Archaeology Podcast Network. Thanks for listening.
This show is produced and recorded by the Archaeology Podcast Network, Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, in Reno, Nevada, at the Reno Collective.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to archpodnet.com/members for more info.